I don't have a pattern to show you today because it's one I drafted myself, and I will have the video for drafting the pattern up next week. So in 1 week, I'll have that link right up here in the corner for you, and you can go watch how I drafted the pattern. But we're making a very traditional vintage style bed jacket today. Let me show you this cool fabric I found. This is pre-quilted. Look at this, it's sort of like a toile looking. And then the back side has almost a pillow ticking. Look at that, isn't that cute? It's just black and white and gray. Gray on this side, black and white on this side. But I'm going to trim it all out in white satin bias. Bought a giant roll so I don't have to make it myself. And I bought beautiful laces, so it's going to have a black lace collar. And I have a few, I bought these for trimming, and they kind of look like an old-fashioned crocheted lace, not real wide. I have two different options here. There, I can't find its end, but I'm sure it's in there. I'll work that out later. We're just gonna go cut this out really quickly because it's two pieces, the front and the back. The back's in the fold, the front isn't. It's real straightforward for cutting, so I'll just show you a quick little clip of that. Then we'll be back in here to start sewing. I believe almost 99% of this will be done at the sewing machine since I'm trimming everything out in bias. I may just do this top shoulder seam at the serger to make it more compressed because this is pre-quilted. So let's go cut this out and start sewing. I was worried about the fabric being directional, but actually you can see they flip, so it doesn't matter that much at all. So that makes life easy. Let me just lay this on here. You can see how nice the black lace is going to look on it. So let's get cutting. This is all there is to the cutting out. I have two layers. This is quilted and self-lined, so I don't have to worry about lining or anything else. So we're just, here's the front, there's the back. It's on the fold. The only seam I'm going to have is this one right here at the shoulder because I'm trimming it all out in bias. This type of fabric is perfect for making placemats, coasters, a pre-lined little jacket, hot water bottle covers. It's great. You can do a lot with it. And I think I definitely will have some left over. I forgot to mention, this is 106 inches wide. We're all cut out. Super simple cutting. And I'm going to just put everything together at the shoulder seam really quickly. I think I'll serge it right here at the serger just to make that nice and compressed. Okay, if you wanted to, you could make this reversible pretty easily by, at the seams up here, if you did a self-enclosed seam, like a flat felled seam where it folds in on itself, it does this thing, then it looks nice on both sides. Now I don't want this side out. I really want it only as a lining. This will be my side that's out. Isn't that cute? Okay, we're gonna just sew it together at the seams. This is the back. And you can kind of see how long it's going to be. Just right. I can see myself wearing this. Let me move this. I can see myself wearing this in bed while reading or playing Animal Crossing or another video game. I can also see sitting at the sewing machine, which I do right now since I'm in the basement right now. I get cold down here sometimes, and I could see having this around my shoulders while sitting at the sewing machine too. So here we are. I'm gonna make sure I don't lose track of which is shoulder and which is center front. Okay, we're gonna sew this together on the seams. I'll be right back, and then I'll show you about bias. All right, I'm at the serger, just doing my side seams, regular 4-thread stitch, letting it take off the little tiny bit of extra and also compress all of these layers. You can see it's pretty thick, which will make it lace more smoothly under the bias when I trim it out. Look at how nice and compressed it makes that seam. So if you don't want to trim out the inside and bias, that works great. And you could serge all the way around the whole thing to make it just a little flatter and easier to work with if you wanted to. We're ready to start our bias. I bought this giant thing of satin bias. I'm starting right here at the center front. I'm not going to worry about the neckline. The neckline, I'm actually going to use the bias to fold to the back and trim it out so you won't see bias along this neckline. But you could easily start at the center back and trim this entire thing in bias if you wanted to. I'm going to hide my neckline bias because I'm also putting on that pretty little collar. So we're just folding this over the edge like this. Now you can just straight stitch this right on. You could do a teeny tiny zigzag if you want to, because I'm going to trim it with the lace when I'm done. So I'm going to go around, I'm going to add the bias, and then I'm going to come back and put this lace on. And the lace can either face out like this, if I want to do it that way, or it can be caught, and you can actually do it all in one fell swoop, so that the lace is caught inside the bias like that. So you can do it either way. I am going to apply mine on top so it hides the bias like that. So I'm just going to start doing this. I think because I'm going to straight stitch this on, but I think I'm going to zigzag this on with a tiny little, not a satin stitch, just a little narrow one, because you can see how thick it is, and I just think that's going to make it a little easier to compress it and to hold this all on, since it's not going to show anyway. So I'm going to start this over at the sewing machine, white thread, and just go all the way around. And because of how I've cut this, when I come down here to this corner, if you've ever done a bias corner, it'll actually, you can round this corner out if you want to. I made it flat, but I may round it because it sure makes it easier to do your corner. Otherwise, I may have to do a little miter in my bias right there. But I think what I'm going to do is just curve it a little bit, and then I don't have to worry about it. All right, on to bias. All right, I know it's going to be a little hard to hear, but I want you to be able to hear this, so hopefully you can. Can you hear that sound? It's sort of a cutting sound. It goes, that's a dull needle. So when you hear the needle hitting, you can hear it cutting through the fabric like that. That's not a good sign. I need to change out my needle. In other news, this is how the bias is looking. This is the back side. This is the front side. Got some little hairs to cut, but you can see how it's going. It looks really pretty and smooth and finished off. I've bound with bias all the way around. I went ahead and rounded out my corner just to make my life a little easier, and it really did. Next, I'm going to sew just a little straight stitch on the 3/8 line around the neckline, and then I'm going to turn back this neckline so that I can cover this raw edge with bias. And the reason I'm going to first straight stitch is because I need to make some little clips so this will lay nice and flat. And then this is going to get covered with bias, and so the bias will get stitched down to the inside, and then I'm ready for lace. And I have to decide how I want to do the closure. A frog closure would be easiest and best, but I don't know where any of my frog closures are. So, and I don't think I'm going to go run to the store real quick and buy one to finish this. So I'll probably go pick out a nice little black button or two and make a loop. I noticed a lot of the traditional ones just had ties. And I could easily do a little white ribbon tie on this because I have lots of white ribbon. I don't have any black ribbon, I don't think so anyway. I'm not sure. That's for the end. Let's get the neckline finished, get all the laces on, and then we'll decide how we want to close it. So here I am at the neckline. I've done a little stitch along the 3/8 just to make it extra stable. I'm opening up my bias. See this little folded edge? That's going to be along the 3/8 inch line. I'm hanging off extra so that I can fold this back later to finish it off. I'm just going to stitch this bias right along the 3/8 inch line. I'm going to try and stitch right in the ditch if possible. And then I'll come back and we'll clip, fold to the back, and then this is going to get hand whipped on the inside just because it's going to be prettier. There is lace going on here, so you could machine stitch down once you reverse it if you want to, because the lace will cover this, but I think I'm going to hand whip it. Here's the bias on the neckline. You can see how it's stitched on. Now we're going to take our little scissors, let me find them, and I'm going to clip through this area like this so that it folds through easily. And that, pardon, I know that's loud. We're going to then fold this in on itself. All of this is going to get folded to the back. like this. And I'm making sure to pull back just enough so that the bias doesn't show on this little bit of the neckline. It's going to get pulled down like that, and then I'm just going to whip this down. Now, if you're doing a lace collar like I am, you could machine stitch that down. You would see that machine stitching line, but once the collar goes on, you would see less. But I'm going to hand whip it, so I'm just going to flip all this around as I trim, and you've got to make those little clips so that that neckline will curve nicely. If you don't, there's enough bias that it curves pretty well, but it won't curve real well, and it gets tight. This side I haven't clipped yet, and it looks okay, but it's tight. It's definitely tight. It's not pulling nicely. This side lays very pretty. All right, handwork for a minute, and then we'll do lace. After hunting through all of my button boxes, I didn't really have a button I liked, so I'm going to go ahead and just put white ribbon. I've just slipped it inside here, and I'm going to just whip it down. I could even have, and should have really, machine stitched it under here to make it nice and sturdy, but I'll whip it really good so it's nice and strong, and then we'll just continue the whipping all the way around. So I've stitched very carefully right along there, and I'm just turn the corner and I'm coming all around, just whip stitching it, and I'm making sure to only catch the inside. I'm not letting my stitches come through to the outer edge, to the outer fabric. So I'm just catching the lining fabric only, but that's how it's finishing off. It's going to be very pretty. And then you won't be able to see the bias if I do it right from the right side. Finished off the little neckline on the inside, and I've gone back and forth on my laces, and I think this is the one I'm going to use. And I'm just pinning it right next to my bias, and I'm just going to stitch it all the way around, and then I'm going to come back and put on my collar, and it's done. I've switched out on the machine my top thread, so I have black on top and white on the bottom, and that's just so that I have black against black, and I don't want black to show on the inside. This could be whip stitched on my hand, but boy, it's going to go a lot faster at the machine. All right, I'm just straight stitching this on. Look at how pretty that looks. This is the inside. Super pleased with that. I think that's going to be so sweet looking. Well, I have a really cute tree skirt. It's kind of what it reminds me of right now because it's a circle skirt. It just ties. I'm now just whip stitching down the collar along the neckline. And because I'm doing it by hand, it's really easy to work in any little bit of ease that I might have right along here. But that's how it's looking. And once that's done, it's complete. And I might come back and do a few little tacks down here. I don't know. It really is just a tree skirt. Or is it a bed jacket? And then on the inside, this is how the little neckline looks with the bias. And this is the bias along the edge. A little ribbon caught on the inside. I just hand stitched this down. See, there's no black threads showing anywhere. All right, I have a very pretty little bed jacket done. Ta-da! Look at that. So pretty. Okay, I like the little vintage look. I think it's really cute. It ties up here at the neck, and it is warm. And I like the length. It's just right for moving around, which is what I was hoping for. I wanted about an 18-inch length. I'm gonna hold this up so you can see it's just a half circle. There's kind of looks like a sleeve the way it's laying. And I noticed on some of the vintage ones that they actually had little ties or a little button in a loop, something like that underneath here to kind of make a sleeve. So that's certainly an option. You could even just tack it and create a sleeve if you want to. But doesn't it make you think, okay, I see two things. Kind of reminds me of Little Women, and it also reminds me of sort of the 1960s Mary Tyler Moore sort of thing. I think it's just adorable. I'm going to just spin this around so you can see it from behind. So here's the back. So it's a tree skirt. I had to run to the store today, so I grabbed a little frog. I actually got a couple styles to see which one I liked, but this very simple one sort of mimicked the shape of the flower, and I liked that best. So I took off the ribbons and replaced it with the frog, and I'm very glad that I did. I prefer it And I think it just fits the style perfectly. See you next week for another fun video.
Que je rêve de toi, oui, du soir.